You can now increase the level of the electric guitars a little bit. And that vocal will stand out. Now what I want to do with the vocal is it sounds quite plain, so the first thing I would do would be put another equalizer on the vocal, use the high pass filter again. Now the trick with equalizing that I found is I go to extremes and then come back from that. So you can hear that's taking a lot of bottom end off the vocal, and probably too much. It's more of a special effect now. So I come back to, there's not a lot in vocal below 150 hertz. And then if it sounds boxy at all, you're looking at frequencies around between 450 and about 650. A good trick to use to find it is to narrow your bandwidth and increase the gain, and then scan around. You can hear it doesn't sound too good there, so if we take that frequency out, it sounds better. And then just put a little bit of extra high frequency on there. And keep an eye on the master levels. We've got a lot of headroom at the moment, but what I'm going to start doing now is to toughen up the rhythm section, the kick and the snare and the bass, which will be a quite involved process. Oh, sorry, I've also got a backing vocal there. If you, just while I'm there, it sounds like I'm singing in a vacuum at the moment, so we'll fix that up later on as well. We'll give the vocals an environment and everything else an environment too. But for now, I'll show you how to compress things to make them have more impact and sound bigger. Start with the kick. And I do all this as with everything else in the mix. I don't really mix much in solo because things should sound good in the mix anyway. So once you know what the outcome of your effects are going to be, you don't really need to solo everything. So I'll click on the trusty Reaper compressor, and at the moment we're just getting the same output as we're getting on the input, so that meter should be the same as on the track. With the compressor, there's a threshold level where below that threshold level nothing is affected by the unit, and above the threshold level the level is reduced by a certain amount, which is set by the ratio. So at the moment I have signal levels going over the threshold, so if I increase the ratio, we start to see some reduction on this meter here, which is showing that we're getting a lot of reduction. We're getting minus 13 decibels taken off that signal. You might wonder why you would want to, by reducing the level, it makes it sound more, makes the sound have more impact and bigger. Well, there's another part to it which we'll get to, but the attack sets how long it takes for that reduction to occur, and the release is how long it takes for the compressor to stop reducing the over threshold levels. So I'll just bring the ratio back a bit to about 10 to 1 roughly, which means everything over the threshold, every time the kick drum level goes over the threshold, whatever went over the threshold is reduced in decibels by a ratio of 10 to 1. So if you have 10 decibels over, you now have 1 decibel over. And that's indicated by the gain reduction meter. So you set the threshold so that you're getting some reduction, so you need signal going over that threshold. If I go back to 0, there's no signal is going over the threshold, so I'll bring it down until I get a reasonable reduction. And then the last step for setting up a compressor is to set the makeup gain, which brings our sub-threshold levels up. So what we've done is restricted the dynamic range of that signal. And to set the output gain, you have a look at how much gain you're losing through the compressor and then bring up an equal amount. Now we can hear the kick drum a bit better all of a sudden. And play around with the attack. The attack, you should set the attack for a kick drum so that the compressor doesn't work until after the initial hit has gone through. Now our kick drum has a bit more presence about it. Then go into the snare and set up a similar setting on a compressor. And once again, I will set the ratio first this time, about 10 to 1. And bring the threshold down until we start to see decent gain reduction. You don't want total gain reduction all the time, because the compressor's not actually doing anything. You want to smooth out the bumps pretty much, so you want the gain reduction meter to come on often but not all the time, and not too far. Like, we don't really want anything over negative 12 decibels. The two things affect how much the compressor reduces the gain, and that's the ratio and the threshold. The threshold is basically how far the compressor is going to dip into the overall signal and reduce from that overall signal, and the ratio is how much reduction is actually getting done over the threshold. So now I'll just set the attack to let a fair bit of that whack get through. And we're losing about 5.5 decibels, so bring that back up. Output gain. I've got the attack set to 54 milliseconds, which is a very quick time, but the initial click of the snare is very quick as well.